Welcome back, subscribblers. Today is actually the first time I've ever done mermaid. More specifically, I'm on day 9, but I decided to follow the prompt list by subjectively 5. I'll put it up on screen here, and I'm having a lot of fun with this because I'm basically making an encyclopedia for all of the mermaid days and trying a new spin on things of getting outside my comfort zone. So let's talk about that. First up on the journey, the deepest depths of the ocean, we have the Bobbit Worm. This prompt gave me so many ideas because this creature is nightmare fuel for me personally. I do not like constrictive creatures that can consume things, and this thing basically has what I believe is known as a vice grip, unescapable. If a fish swims too close, it will basically, like a double-ended fishing hook, latch onto you and will tear into the skin and fins and won't let go. And I just thought it would be interesting for this fella here, if you were down in the depths of the ocean and you just so happened to see them, keep a good 10 feet distance because these creatures are known to be that long. Now, being a small fish would be deadly, but being a much larger predator kind of creature, you would be safe. But I don't actually know if anything actually could eat a bobbit worm, considering these things are loaded with large spikes all along their body, but they do look very pretty. I will say, out of all of the color choices, if I ever had to have a scaly, I would say I want an iridescent one because they're just so gorgeous, having like pastel or even like a just pure rainbow just running down the scales with the light reflecting off of it. But for this creature, I also kind of wanted to mess about between doing more mermaid-styled, where they have more human features, or more monstrous features where they don't look like anything that you would want to approach. Utilizing this for my Dawn of Gale's comic, I may or may not have some of these characters cameo in my Dawn of Gale's comic, depending upon where Vixie goes. Obviously, some of these would not fit in that world, but it's still something that got me out of my comfort zone. And for day 1 of Mermay, I gotta say, I'm very happy with how the first picture turned out. And then we have day 2, the right whale. I have personally never drawn a whale before. Last time I attempted to make one was in Inktober, and that was just a spell, and this one, I actually gotta say, I had a lot of fun with the idea of it being sort of like a Beauty and the Beast situation where it's a monstrous whale that looks very scary and not too pretty, but I went on the sort of like, if you approach them and you are not a tiny krill, you won't get swallowed whole by them, but also that they just genuinely need some help. I mean, if you were a whale covered in all this algae and all these barnacles, you'd want a little bit of help too. So the idea for this creature is that if you approach them cautiously and you assist them with scrubbing off some of the barnacles and tidying up their seaweed hair, they will guide you in whatever direction you need to, because these guys are the size of an 18-wheeler and will be able to swim great distances. But overall, I have to say that though this one is not on my favorites list, I gotta say he's actually pretty cute for a giant whale. Up next, we have the spotted spiny lobster. Now, I couldn't decide whether I wanted this creature to be more monstrous or not because I had the idea that these guys are sort of like an endangered kind of species because they are illegally hunted for their lobster tails. I myself personally absolutely love lobster tails. I have them every time that I can as a special occasion, but I imagine that these guys are super friendly and they don't know what can happen, but there's so many of them, so they're able to survive, and they're getting smarter. They're so friendly that I just imagine that when you go up to them, they don't have as wide of an expansive knowledge of the world because they don't travel very far, so they don't know the dangers of creatures out there like sharks or octopuses or other sea creatures or non-sea creatures, such as some pirates that might come and swoop down with nets and catch them. But it is something that I had so much fun with. I honestly, this is way outside of my comfort zone, have never ever tried to make a crustacean or anything like this. Like, I don't know how to really make spiders or lobsters or crabs or anything like this, so this I'd have to say, I'm really glad I gave Mermay a chance this year, because the past few years I just never saw the point to it, and I know that there are dozens of prompts out there, just like how Inktober has changed and there's so many different ways that you can do it. You can make your own, and honestly, honestly, I feel like if I made my own next year, that could be something fun for you guys to follow along. Me following someone else's prompt list is just a way for me to, see what my work versus someone else's work looks like, and it's fantastic to see the direction. For me, going for an encyclopedia of these creatures that I can, utilize for future story stuff is something that I enjoy doing, whereas others may just like to doodle a couple of mermaids. And I honestly like that I gave myself rules in this of that all of the lower halves of these guys matches the fish or the prompt in general, and I've been enjoying making a mix of mermaid, merman, mermonster, and it's just been so much fun. But I love this guy. I wouldn't want to have lobster tail from him. Next we have the lancet fish, and this one screamed monstrous design the minute that I saw this fish. This fish looks like it takes 2 fishermen to hold, and my goodness, this one, I had such a pain with trying to position the torso. I had asked my boyfriend multiple times of does this look okay? Should I move this that way? How should I draw them? And then I ended up changing the upper arm pose because it was just blocking the stomach, and I couldn't decide if I wanted to have it cut off like a straight line, or if I wanted it to naturally form scales. So I went with a hybrid, and I had the torso bending and twisting in such a way. But this creature, this is a creature if you run into in the seas, you better flee for your life, because they are like hungry sirens, but without the pretty voice. They will just go after you if you mistake them for a regular mermaid, just because of the way that they have gorgeous glowy scales that reflect metallic-y, but they are also super dangerous with those sharp teeth and razor fins. And let me tell you, drawing all of those scales one by one was a pain, but it definitely looked a lot better than if I were to use just kind of like a stamp of scales, just because I wanted it to look like this fish had been through some battles, because I imagine that they're probably not too big. They're probably like a 5-foot fish rather than a 10-foot long fish, so they would still be small enough that if you ran into one of them, you could probably combat them, but if you ran into a whole army of these, you'd be in some trouble. I actually did like the idea that if this was in the Dawn of Gales, this would be something that if Vixie and the crew were on a ship trying to travel, would be something that they would encounter that would try tearing up the boards, trying to get someone and drag them down to the bottom of the depths of the ocean. Another experimental thing that I was trying to do was trying to mimic the sort of blotchy patterns that were on the top of the lancet fish, trying to add that to the skin of this creature. And I'd have to say that this one has become my favorite so far, just because of how much time it took for me to make this one, and the multiple times that I redrew them. But let me know what you guys think of the lancet fish. Would you dare to approach and challenge this beast? Next we have the lion's mane jelly. I actually had the idea for this creature right off the bat. When I had made this, I wanted to go based off of my own past experience with fantasy creatures, that this creature lives forever, pretty much, and they are dangerous because of how many of their tendrils they have. These are actually one of the few jellyfish that I think you have to use, like, salt water if you get stung or something to relieve that myth about using pee is not true. I don't actually know if that works on any jellyfish, but this one, just be very careful if approaching in the ocean, but they are a rather lonely creature because they don't really get much company because of their reputation, but they are magnificent to look at. But these beasts, I'd say, are probably a good 15 feet long, so be careful if you're swimming in the seas and you see them, but don't be afraid to talk to them. Next on the prompt list was actually something different. Estuary. That's not a fish. That's not even a sea creature. This is actually more like a location. It's actually where, I believe it says the ocean meets kind of like a river on an island. But this one definitely gave me an idea. I actually asked my boyfriend if I should combine the fact that there should be little, like, mermaids or fish swimming up their tail, and I thought, if it's meeting a river from the ocean, what does that remind me of? Salmon! It reminded me of salmon, and I imagine that this would be sort of like a goddess of the seas, and honestly, I think for the prompts, because there are more non-fish prompts, there's, like, open ocean, I think I'm going to make these sort of like the guardians or the goddesses of this encyclopedia, because I haven't quite figured out what I'm doing with all of these, if they're just going to be one-off ideas or if I'm going to add them, but this one I thought would be sort of like where the ocean meets rivers, and this goddess if you approach very kindly and you let them do their business, they will assist you if you need any direction. They are able to guide you to where you are. If you are just at an island and you don't know where you are and you've just arrived from the seas, they will gladly help you. But if you are someone who is like a pirate and you're trying to hunt salmon and you are trying to disrupt everything, they will gladly use their powers to push you out further to seas. And I imagine that this is kind of the creature that where stuff like the Bermuda Triangle and stuff would be, where just people just kind of suddenly disappear and no one really knows why. I imagine that would be kind of like a fun adventure for Vixie if she ran into a goddess like this and she gets stranded on an island and has to find her way home. Don't know, just thought it would be an interesting character interaction, but I did have fun designing this particular mermaid. And of course, I have to say, I had to do a reverse mermaid. I have to say credit to Casey Golden, because she's probably the first person I've seen who's done a reverse mermaid. I'm sure that there are tons of other artists out there who have done it, but she has an adorable fish that's like reversed, where it's the head is the fish instead of the person, and the fins are feet instead. And I love the idea for this one, because this creature, when I first saw it, I was like, what am I even looking at? This creature looks like it's straight out of a nightmare film, because it just looks like a normal, like a mud skipper almost, because of the colors, and it blends in. But then when this fish opens its jaws, it's like, get away from me, get off my lawn. And it's got such an interesting design to it, and the fact that it's named Fringe, I had to add as many of the fins to the upper part of the body of this creature. Now, I will admit this one wasn't exactly as creative as the others so far, in my opinion, but who knows, maybe you guys like this creature and perhaps you can come up with a nickname for them. You know, if you were at the bottom of the ocean and you saw this creature hiding and then when it pops out, would you be terrified, or would you be more intrigued by the fact that it has human legs? Let me know what you guys think of the Fringe head in the comment section down below. Next we have the elephant seal, and I love this guy so much. I didn't think that I would, but every time I look at videos of seals and I just see them enjoying themselves on the beach and the rocks, they're just happily jumping around, and I just love the noises they make, even if it can be very loud. I've never been to a beach before, and that's going to be one of my goals, but I don't think I'll ever see one, but I just imagine that they are majestic, but also they're dangerous too, because I imagine that the tusks and how large they are, they still consume fish, and I think they're carnivorous or omnivorous. But just look at how happy he is. I wanted him to look so happy, and of course, because the elephant seal does have such a large nose, I was debating on making this a monstrous creature, but I like the idea of him just being a happy fella that you can approach. He's just happy best boy. And then we have the last one for this week. I think that this one honestly looks like it could be its own kind of goddess, but these guys, I'm gonna say, they're small. Like, the blue Glocus, I don't know how to honestly pronounce it, but these are so small that they fit in the palm of your hand, but don't touch them, because from what I've read, these guys are super poisonous, unless I'm mixing them up with another creature. But these guys are so pretty. When I first saw a picture, I'm like, oh, they're so small. So I imagine that these creatures would probably only be like a 2 to 3 foot little fish swimming around, and they would just be so rare that if you ever came across one of them, you could kind of try and communicate with them. But I thought the idea for these creatures, because of how small they are, they wouldn't speak any known language. I imagine that they're like an alien in the fish world, and they don't know how to communicate with others unless they're a part of their species. So if you find one and you can somehow communicate with them, they are great company, but they are dangerous creatures. So it's up to you of whether or not you would decide to trust this mermaid if you came across them. But that wraps it up for this. That's this week's mermaid. And honestly, for my first ever mermaid, 9 days into it, I gotta say, I love this challenge, and it's given me a reason to make more encyclopedias and test the waters of things. And if you've made it this far in the video and you're not already part of that subscriber squad, please consider putting your paws to that subscribe button. It helps YouTube know that you guys want to see more of this content. And don't forget to share it to your friends. I have a link tree for my Patreon and other behind-the-scenes exclusive content and merch. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay possum. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.